Welcome to our 38th AVC Subcommittee meeting for Sovereign Finance. We are in the second week, and today's scope is regarding support. So, hello, GM, Clocky, Julia, Pampero, Anon Builder, PB, Blue, Pipkin. I see already our guest is here, so we're going to start the meeting. As you have seen in our forum post, we're going to discuss different topics regarding this particularly scope with a guest. Right away, since we have a lot of questions regarding these topics. So first of all, we're encourage everyone that probably has doubts or questions, wants to know more. And as you can see, we're also today going to discuss regarding the uh, topic of the moment. We're gonna discuss some questions regarding Athena and Morpho. And this is very interesting because we're going to focus on what has been said about the risks and talk about it and what are the actual risks, and also kind of like tell and understand which are not. I think this is a very important topic since it has been happening lately. Hey, good to see you, your name. And so, yes, I think this is the perfect moment, the good timing as well with Trinae, as always, asking relevant questions. And everyone, please, um, let's make this very active participation. And so, yes, that also topics such as, of course, regarding Spark, who I think Tadeo, our guest for today, has a lot to share with us when it comes to probably updates or information that understands better. It knows more about this. Um, we're also going to try to get to know more about what is happening with those subDAOs that we don't hear more or read about. This includes the real world assets subDAOs and also the main the topic itself, the real world asset, and what it has to do with the subDAOs and the framework. So yes, we've seen lately like people asking questions related to what's happening with certain subDAOs. So again, this is the really good timing for us to have Tadeo as a guest. So hello, welcome, Tadeo. I'm going to start first by asking you to introduce yourself. So tell us about you and what is your experience, what have you been doing in Maker, and probably if you want, tell us a little bit more before starting with the questions. How are you?
Hi, Chris. Thank you for having me. 1 second, let's see if I can actually activate the camera. Yeah, I can. Please. There we go. Okay, now you can see me. Now I can see the screen. Cool. Hey, everyone. I'm Tadeo. I've been part of the Maker ecosystem for about, I think, 3 years now. Started as a community member, then joined a core unit, what was called one of the independent teams at that time. And then for the last year and a half, I had been part of Phoenix Lab, which is an ecosystem actor currently focused on building Spark. I've actually just recently left Phoenix Lab and now taking some time off. But I think I'm always going to stick around the Maker family, essentially.
Yeah, well, I'm
Chris,
definitely not.
yep.
Yeah. I'm not gonna turn on the camera and start saying that, but thank you for doing it. I think it's one of the first guests to turn on the camera, and thank you for also giving us this alpha. I don't think that many people knew about it. That you are no longer part of the Spark team. So, well, we're not going to. Maybe you want to tell us more about it, but you might know different um I don't know, like certain topics that we don't know and we need to more to understand a little bit better. So let's start with the questions then. Regarding, I know that a lot of people wanted to know when it comes to more Fonifina, and we are gonna get there. So that they are right. We're going to also talk about the actual risks that are happening. But let's start focusing first on Spark. So yeah, if you could tell us anything related to the token, how is it going? Like, how will the launch of the token of the ASPK token impact users? And if you could tell us how is it going to work? Like, will SPK holders gain the ability to make decisions through voting, or what is going to be the system like? What can you tell us about the token?
Yeah. So actually, that was my point. I think the list of topics that you have is really good. I would just flip them. So we go from the bigger concepts down to like the very much the exhaustion implementation, the case of Tina. Just jumping around a bit on the SPK launch. This will happen with the SubDAO launch, or the launch of the SubDAOs and the new Maker brand. I still don't know a specific date for this. Clearly, it hasn't been announced or anything, so we're still kind of waiting on that. But essentially, once that will happen, particularly Spark has been running a merit drop campaign for the last few months. So that means from day zero, the idea is that the users have been farming the token should basically receive that token. Again, there's a lot of things that still need to be confirmed, and there's going to be still small tweaks up to the point of the launch itself. But I think in broad strokes, it's pretty clear that's kind of going to be the situation. Once that happens, and this is going to relate to the discussion, like broader discussion about sub-DAOs and basically Endgame itself, is what powers will SPK tokens have at that point? That will very much depend on Maker governance and the Maker voters of how much, essentially, how much responsibility they defer to the Spark sub-DAO. And this comes back to the point of sub-DAOs in general, why this idea has been being implemented for the last 2 years, is that there was way too much decision making happening at a single level, which is Maker governance. It was basically impossible for a single person to correctly, effectively participate in governance. You were being asked to not only read, discuss, have an opinion on, and also vote on very different topics, from technical implementations of smart contracts to real assets, so basically financial and legal contracts. Also the hiring and firing of teams from very different strokes. So the idea is to kind of atomize this and to make it more manageable. So when it comes down to exactly how much freedom or independence a sub-DAO has, it very much depends on how going to be moved around, but it really depends on how much it makes sense for them to have. So taking the example of Spark is currently under the sub-DAO. There's the Spark Lend, so the lending engine, and now there's a secondary credit line or DDM that is going to Athena. This is being managed on the same way that it's being managed at the maker level when it comes to setting the parameters of votes. It's being managed by expert teams that have been appointed by maker governance. So the question is, once the sub-DAO launches, should SPK token holders directly define this rate, or should they also essentially appoint an expert to do this? This entail will essentially be up to the SPK holders, but then on the maker governance level, you have to decide how much degrees of freedom you allow the SPK holders to have. So if that kind of non-answer makes sense, it's kind of like it really has to be defined by maker governance how much freedom they give the SPK holders to have. And it really will be down back to how much risk this comes down to. Do I allow SPK holders to just mint infinite amount of DAI, or do you give it a maximum level of it? Does that kind of answer the question a bit?
Yeah, you gave a lot of information that I don't think that we had it, at least personally, very clear. So yeah, thank you. Is there like any date for the launch of the SPK token? Like,
not that I've heard of. So this is all because it's not that Spark will launch by itself. It will launch in conjunction with the other sub-DAOs, plus the rebranding of Maker itself, and the launch of the new Maker tokens. So what we call NST and NGT. So new stablecoin token and new governance token. So I think there's a lot of coordination there happening, and there hasn't been. You have to have all the different players in aligned to actually be able to launch.
yeah, and regarding this as well, the system, the governance system and the structure is gonna be like, will there be a delegate system in place, or is gonna be like the SPK holders are going to directly participate when it comes to voting?
So this is actually a really cool, let's say, feature of sub-DAOs, which is the sub-DAO itself should be will be able to most likely choose what the governance system they want to have. Do you want to force delegation? So no SPK holder can actually vote directly, but they are forced to delegate to a, let's say, preset list of delegates, or do you not have any type of delegation whatsoever, and you kind of enforce direct democracy, or you have a mixture, an open system, kind of what Maker has had for the last few years. I think the cool thing is like every sub-DAO will be able to kind of choose and experiment depending on also what their objective is. If you think about, and we can talk about this a bit more later, if you have a very niche sub-DAO that maybe does only real assets, and it comes down to very complex deals or systems, maybe direct democracy doesn't really benefit that much the system. At the end of the day, governance really just means decision making. So it's like, how do you want to make decisions? Do you want to bring as many people as possible, or do you want to focus only on experts that are able to provide that decision? Both systems have kind of pros and cons on it. So ultimately, it really is about like, okay, what's the real objective of the sub-DAO? Therefore, what's the governance system that will allow that sub-DAO to achieve its objective?
Yeah, each sub-DAO is gonna be like very independent and could make any kind of experimentation. It doesn't matter like if they fail. I think that that's the purpose, right? Like if it's better if
Yeah,
they,
exactly.
as long as they are
And the
doing
idea
something
here,
different.
yeah, and the ultimate, the really important things, and like the, let's say, we call like the guardrails or what the limits of this experimentation is that at no point should Maker be at any risk. and by extension, no DAI holders should be at any risk. So no matter what type of experimentation happens at the sub-DAO level, in their worst case scenario, it shouldn't have a negative repercussion into Maker. Basically, saying shortly, Maker should never lose money. It should never be at risk of losing money. So if you take Sparkland as an example, Sparkland itself is a over-collateralized lending system, meaning that the risk of insolvency is fairly low compared to other systems, let's say under-collateralized lending. So I could actually set up a system that really similar to the version 1 of we-related protocols, such as Centrifuge, Maple, Goldfinch, and so on. You could say, hey, give me money. So I'll use Maker's money, and I'll go and lend out funds to companies, but I'm not asking for any credit. That is fairly risky because the company can just go bust or simply just decide not to pay me back. And at some point, I have no money. So at that point, I represent a very big risk to Maker. So something like Sparkland is very low risk because not only do I actually have the money in the system, it's also fully on-chain. So at any point in a single second, I can actually bring back the money, speaking like at the high level. If I actually want to go in and say, there's a very important market that has been addressed, where we can look at, for example, loans to SMEs that have always been underserved by the traditional banking system, and these loans are under collateralized, and you can only claim back your money maybe after like 30 days or 60 days. That is still something that as a system we want to explore, but that carries a lot more risk. So in that case, you will need to have a lot more guardrails for that to work. So for example, a big thing is the sub-DAO itself should have its own treasury, its own backstop of money, that if any of those deals go bad and they can't get back their loan, they're able to basically essentially pay back Maker. So Maker never loses money again. Again, it's kind of like a function of the risk that you're exposing the system to how much guardrails you need to have on your own at that moment. So if you think about that system, for example, when it comes back to the point of view from governance, is maybe that type of highly specialized and, like, let's say, fairly risky endeavor should actually have less decision-making freedom, and maybe more experts involved, and maybe a bit more direct oversight from Maker governance, rather than like as much freedom as maybe other sub-DAOs can have.
Interesting. So to understand this point, what you're saying is that as long as it's not risky, because what personally I was understanding is that okay, so those are experimentations and they can, try their own thing. But as long as it's not risky for Maker, because if sub-DAOs make something and goes wrong and it fails and risk Maker, they're trying to avoid that. So it has to, they can try whatever experimentation they want to, but as long as it's not risky for Maker, right?
Yeah, and again, it's this idea of like risk is a range, and you can have things that are like less risky and some that are less risky. And the idea is that you want to be able to diversify as much as possible. But then you also need to take, like, you have to approach these two separate endeavors differently. You can have, for example, let's think about let's say the most risk averse way of lending money, which is asking for more collateral than what you're actually lending out, charging a very low fee. That means that the users have very low risk of actually not being able to return the money. At that point, that is a very safe business, and a business that will for sure have users, but you're not going to make that much money. Like on the profit level, it's going to be very low, which is fine. It's very low risk, low reward. That's fully understandable, and actually presents a great opportunity to actually have DAI in the system being minted out based off that. If you look at something that might give a high yield, but also represents more risk, there you might be in a position where you're in a position to actually make more money, but also you have more risk to actually go bust and actually not be able to get the money back. So at the end, you kind of do this like risk reward calculation, and basically, is this worth it? It's like, is this much future profit worth the risk that you're taking? And then how do you minimize that risk? So what happens if the worst case scenario happens? How do you get out of that? How do you minimize that? So what we hopefully we'll get to see in the future when we have a lot more sub-DAOs in the system is you're going to have sub-DAOs that might actually look extremely risky, but they're in a position where they have the independence to go out and fail, and if they do fail, there's no negative repercussions to Maker because they have junior capital, they have their own treasury, they're able to pay back, they have all the systems in place to ensure that it basically doesn't infect negatively back into Maker and all the other sub-DAOs.
Okay, that was a good point to make it clear. So it's not like if a sub-DAO fails, Maker fails. It depends. It depends on different situation and how is like the tokenomics. And talking about it, actually, to the next question. Actually, there is another one. Where will sub-DAOs get these treasuries though? Okay, from where?
Yeah, it's a good point from paper. On the point is how do they actually build out a treasury? So you're correct. For now, there's no clear message on this. The first point is these sub-DAOs will actually be making profits. Those profits should be firstly going into the treasury. That means that at the start, the sub-DAOs will actually have very low money in those treasuries. There will be a stream of money going in. I think at that point, it makes sense that they still have a lot of guardrails and they don't have that much, let's say, freedom of decision making themselves. And as much as they accumulate a treasury and they're able to withstand negative, let's say, loss of capital, at that point, they should be able to be given more freedom to kind of experiment as much as they want to. Again, it's this idea of providing guardrails to provide independence, but not. But again, ultimately, what we want to ensure and what the entire system should be able to ensure is that DAI is never at risk. DAI holders are never at risk of all this type of experimentation. DAI users, at least in my personal opinion, shouldn't care too much about every specific deal or every specific funding area that Maker finds in. They should be able to trust the system that no matter what is being done, there's always guardrails to prevent a catastrophic situation from happening.
Best answer I've actually ever heard on this is Paper. Thank you, Paper, for your question.
Thank you, Paper.
And True Name says, so that tokens also will have market making from Maker Core. We understand. So is there a market value that would be captured for the junior capital?
So while I answered the first part of the point, True Name, can you clarify a little bit what you mean by capturing that value? The last time I looked at the sub-DAO tokenomics, and this is coming back to the sub-DAO tokens and the elixir, essentially the liquidity between sub-DAO tokens and MKR or NGT. The idea is that as they grow in value, that value should be able to be accrued back into Maker, like a part of it. Now, when the same way that Maker has this backstop, which is like if Maker itself loses money, it has its own treasury. If that gets depleted fully, it has MKR as value. So they can the system prints more MKR, sells it to the market to be able to get back the money to be able to pay the debt. So there's no bad debts are exposed to. But this means that because you're printing more MKR, you're deleting the value of MKR itself. This is essentially the backstop that we always talk about. All the sub-DAOs will also have this system, this backstop system, which Maker has basically very much first preferential control, let's say, of liquidating a sub-DAO. And this is the way that Maker will in the future essentially kick out the subDAO from the system. It will essentially sell off all the subDAO tokens, rendering them valueless, recouping all the funds back into the system. Okay, so Trinae says subDAO tokens will have a secondary market liquidity, correct? So would their subDAO token market value held by the subDAO form part of the buffer? It's a good question. I'm not sure. I don't think directly. I think indirectly, yes, because what you like for me is I have two subDAOs, A and B. If they both, let's say they operate the same type of product, but one has a big treasury and the other one doesn't, then the subDAO B that actually has the treasury is more valuable than subDAO A. Not only do they have, let's say, cash flows, but they also have equity that, again, I always think about this in terms of risk, but you can also think about it as like enterprise value, where just like how much is this entity worth, or how much is this system worth? It's what's able to generate plus what it already has.
Awesome. Thank you, True Name Paper, for the questions, and I encourage everyone to participate as well. I think this is the perfect time, and also probably Tadeo has a lot of knowledge, and even with what he's saying, it makes us ask even more questions. So this is perfect. Now, let's go back to the point about we were talking about Spark. So regarding the profits that are being generated from Spark, and the Mutable and in other strategies. So in the future, like, will they be still under MakerDAO's ownership, or will SPK have the opportunity to be accumulated profits on their own?
Good point. So again, very much subject to change, because really as an organization, we're learning as we go through the system to like actually what works. If you look at the documents that were first presented as the end game, a lot of things already have changed and been adjusted essentially. But basically, let's talk about more in the future. In the deal future, Maker has deferred the responsibility of the decision making of a lot of these things to the subDAO. Maker will essentially vote on of whether they extend a credit line or a DDM to subDAO A, and based on those parameters. Let's say parameters is like the amount of money I'm willing to allow you to mint, plus what the interest rate I'm going to charge you for that minting. Now, this decision will be made based off what the subDAO is intending to do or will actually do with those funds. The idea, at least on the theoretical level, the idea is that Maker is what we call a senior lender, is someone that is looking for the highest level of security and assurance that we'll always get the money back. But that means that they basically say, okay, I'm not gonna try to make the most amount of money in the world. I'm just gonna try to make a moderate amount of money. And then what you have is kind of like the junior lenders, the junior tranche, which is like, hey, I want to make more money, but I'm also willing to take more risk. So therefore, I don't have the full return of the capital assured. So that's kind of what the subDAO decision will be in a way. So under that, what you end up having is Maker should basically extend credit lines to different subDAOs. It should be at an interest rate that allows the subDAO to charge a premium on top of that, or basically a spread that they are able to claim as profit themselves. And they basically have the incentive to go in and actually go and try to mint DAI into the world, make deals, find different ways of capturing demand for DAI, and hopefully new novel ways that we haven't thought of as of today. The idea is that, for example, with Athena Vault, Maker should charge a base rate on that, and then anything from base rate on top that fluctuates with the market, that should be able to be captured by the subDAO itself. So Maker should always prioritize safety and also predictability. So always charging a rate that they also know that they're always going to get. What happens in the case of Athena, but also with Sparkland itself is, let's say tomorrow, no one in the market demands any more debt, any more lending. Also, that will go to zero, and it can spike up. If tomorrow again, like 100 people wake up and like, I want to borrow more DAI, the interest rates will spike. The ideal scenario is that Maker doesn't see the spikes at all. Maker just sees a fixed percentage that they always charge consistently, and and that should give them predictability. So again, very different ways that they should be operating Maker against the SubDAO. Maker should always be looking at this predictability and security. The SubDAO should be looking at basically growth and taking appropriate risks.
I don't know if it's the fact that it's a video, but I feel like it's better like when it comes to explaining. So it does help a lot.
It's a hand movement. It helps. The hand movements will help a lot.
I think it. Now, can you please elaborate more on the topic, the economics of SPK?
Yes. There's actually a post that I think this is the latest. It's from actually last year. So there's some details have changed, but I think like generally broad strokes, it's still the same. I'm going to place it here. Essentially, tokenomics. Well, we have the. I think it's a couple components. The main component, I mean, the latest component has been the airdrop. That was something that wasn't in the initial system and the initial ideas, at least. That has been incorporated. Then you have a component for essentially incentivizing and paying teams that are going to be contributing directly to the actual SubDAO itself, basically running it and maintaining it. This also includes governance and delegates and whatnot. And then you have the what we call the farming, SubDAO token farming, I think is the full name. Here is divided into two sections. It's for both DAI users or NST and also NGT users or MKR users. I'm going to start using NST and NGT because it's like the appropriate, it'll be those tokens, not necessarily the current tokens that will be part of this farming system, let's say. So essentially, as of now, it's a very simple system of just basically staking or locking your tokens into the farming, essentially. It's basically what you're giving up is what we call the opportunity. You're giving up your opportunity cost. So whenever you make a decision, you put your funds somewhere. You basically have an opportunity cost of because you put them here, you don't put them in the other place. So with NST, is a very, very direct opportunity cost, which is like, do you want to farm the SubDAO token? If yes, that means that you're not, for example, you're not putting your NST into the DSR and you're not getting the DSR rate back, which today, for example, is 13% annualized. So that'll be kind of at least for now, that's the design of the system. You get to lock your tokens there, and then you basically in return, you get a allocation of the SubDAO tokens. Same thing with NGT. There's instead of having the DSR, what you have, and it's not live yet. It has changed their name a bit. It was first called the Sagittarius engine. I think now it's called the Lock Stake engine. It's essentially a form of a yield for NGT users. So what is currently MKR. So the same thing. Would you rather get a yield from that system, from the Lock Stake engine, or would you rather get ownership of tokens for the SubDAO? And there's a schedule, and I think, let me open it quickly. I think it runs on I think gets fully farmed out in 8 years, 10 years, I want to say. Yeah, 10 years. Although there's a decreasing curve, so essentially in the first 4 years, I'm pretty sure already 50% of the total amount of tokens are going to be essentially farmed out. similar to how this curve, like the Bitcoin issuance kind of thing.
The fact that you're trying to use the current names, even though it always changes, so that's good to it, and it's hard to keep up. But yes, now
It's very easy to just like talk about NST all day, every day, and then you talk to someone that doesn't talk on NST terms every day, and then they look at you as like, "What language are you speaking?"
I think that there is this thing that we have to keep up when it comes to always changing the names all the time, and not only that, but like kind of like I don't know if terms that probably in the real world means something different, and in here it's something else. Now, if we talk about Maker, now we also have to relate it to real world assets. So, can you tell us anything about what real world assets Spark is currently, or you're currently analyzing for Spark?
Yep. I don't have that much info, mainly because on the Spark level, we haven't been focusing on real assets. We've been focused more on chain solutions. Although you have, for example, Athena could be considered a real asset just because of I think we currently call anything that's off chain, we call it real assets. So Athena has a very big component that is off chain. Therefore, I would kind of categorize in that section. But basically, broadly, not just Spark, but just in general, Maker and the other sub-DAOs, there are sub-DAOs that are focused on real assets, which again, I don't have any details, so sorry about that. But on the theoretical level, Maker has been doing real assets for like a very long time. I remember the first few finance teams that were doing deals with through Centrifuge, and also directly with they could be like I think it's called credit. Forget the name, like credit generators. Basically, the person that will actually take the money. There's a lot of experimentation, which is very interesting, but also the problem was like it posed like a big of a risk because although the amounts compared to the total size of the system were very small, and there were at least if one deal went bad, and actually there's a deal that went bad, I think it's like 1 million DAI that will never be recovered. But again, that is paid off by the Maker treasury, so no users have any insolvency problem. The problem there is it poses an existential risk to the entire system. So if one bad deal, it affects everyone, right? Because it's actually everyone's treasury that one is sitting there, what we call the surplus buffer. So with the concept of sub-DAOs, the idea is, okay, now all this decision making, all this risk is just put into the sub-DAO. This sub-DAO itself will in the future, again, when it has its own treasury, it will be able to actually pay any loss of capital that they have. But essentially means that if I'm sitting at a Spark sub-DAO, I'm not affected by what the real asset sub-DAO is doing. I mean, we are in a sort of competition against each other. Like if something goes bad with them, it doesn't devalue the DAI of the credit line that I have essentially. Or it also doesn't impact the Maker itself. So that's kind of that's a big reason to actually move to a sub-DAO model, to be able to have this real asset deals that are usually under collateralized, be put into a framework that has guardrails that basically doesn't pose any existential crisis to the Maker system as they could have been previously.
Now that you're describing that, what's kind of like the advantages of how and why it is so important to have sub-DAOs and this structure, like what do you feel is the most, let's say, I don't know if disadvantages or risky part of this kind of a structure?
Well, it's a good point. So we spoke of this idea of deferral of responsibility, of referral decision making down to the sub-DAO. at the end of the day, there's a degree, there's a low guardrails you can put in on a smart contract level, on a governance level, on a process level. I mean, but at the end of the day, you are essentially inheriting the risk of the other entity. This is similar to how when the DDM, what it used to be called the D3M, was a credit line that extended to external protocols such as AVE and Compound. The problem there is it's a very effective system to mint DAI, but it also means that Maker essentially at that point inherited all the risk from AVE. No matter what happened at AVE, all the decision making that happened at AVE, where Maker had no say in the matter, affected Maker. If AVE would have at that point had bad debt for whatever reason or had been hacked, Maker would have lost the loan that they made to AVE or technically AVE users through the AVE protocol. So here it's kind of the same thing. Again, there's a lot more guardrails and a lot more thought put into exactly what part of the system it gets to basically take a decision on what. But at the end of the day, if for whatever reason Maker governance onboards a sub-DAO that is essentially just bad or corrupt, worse, or yeah, plain bad. There's no corruption. This is the funniest thing about all these things is most time it's just not people trying to be bad actors. It's just like they're incompetent. So it's kind of like you can't blame it almost in a way. It's like you didn't mean to. You're just really incompetent at what you do. You're inheriting that risk. So I think that's the main thing. Every time you increase the total credit line that a sub-DAO can get, you're increasing that risk into the system. And again, so there's a lot of things. There's the figure out what American military commander said this. It's like there's the known unknowns and the unknown unknowns. So while you can kind of work around the unknowns that you kind of know, it's like I know that I'm not sure if this can blow up or not. There's a lot of things that you have no idea that can actually happen. And I can bring it back to 2020 with Black Thursday, where the liquidation system essentially failed because no one thought that it could have been possible that the network, the Ethereum network, was so over congested with transactions that no one could actually submit a proper transaction into the liquidation system. So things like that. There's like, could that happen again? I'm not sure what if that happens again, or what if something completely different happens. So yeah, that's kind of, and also that's why the launch doesn't. That's why also Maker Governance is not basically inviting everyone to just create their own DAO. It's kind of like a let's say a beta launch or like a slow launch because of this, because all the details haven't been hashed out. You're not really sure what can actually go wrong right now. So you kind of start experimenting with known teams. You kind of start like building up this. There's things, unfortunately, that I can build an entire novel system and I can try it with 10 DAI and it works perfectly. But then the moment you give me 1,000,000 DAI, it breaks completely. You have no idea that breaks until you put that 1,000,000 DAI. So now if you scale it up to 1,000,000,000, you have this system. Like there's a lot of systems that work perfectly fine with 100 million, but then when you put 1,000,000,000 in, they stop working. Or they start behaving in ways that you never thought it could happen. Just trying to close my point here. It's interesting to defer decision making into a select group of people, but also brings the idea that if those people are wrong, that kind of also still impacts you. Maybe it doesn't burden you with the workload of having to make that decision, but the ultimate decision, you're trying to obviously limit that, but like it will affect you, no matter if you don't like it.
Yeah, I think that now they're currently like looking for risk parameters experts, like more people, not just BA labs. But that was a good point that you made there. It's like there are like different things that since there are not so much information about, there's need to be more like consideration and to take into account different aspects. that right now it's kind of difficult to know. So it's very good that we're having this conversation, because you're telling us and you're explaining to us certain things that probably on the forum there's not that very clear or with more details, but still there's need to we still need more information. For example, you said that okay, you have also no information regarding the other sub DAOs, the reward asset sub DAOs. So I don't know if it's me, but it's frozen your screen. But as long as you can listen to me and talk, it's
Oh
okay,
yeah,
it's fine.
again
So
here.
let's move on to next part. It says, oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
Can you hear
think
me?
that I don't know if there's any other questions before I go to our next one. Um, if not, there was some other topic we
Marian.
wanted to discuss. But I think that Tadeo has mentioning a lot about Sparkland already, not just Spark, about the token, about the subDAOs and how it's going to work, or what they're planning to do and the organization.
Sorry, Chris, can you hear me? You can hear me, right?
I think we're having a problem. Oh, okay, it's me.
Oh, okay. Okay, so everyone can hear me. Okay, cool. Okay, I thought it was me. Okay, so while Chris figures out how he can listen to me, Marian said, when
Yes.
starting the governance system in Spark, do you expect only the maker governance actors to participate, or could you also aim to create Spark's own governance? The same question goes for the community or the ecosystem in general, service providers, advisors, etc. It's a very good point. I think part of the value and the advantage that the Sandal system brings to Maker itself is to be able to basically onboard new actors into the system. The problem before was that, let's say, for example, I was in a previous life I was the facilitator for the data insight core unit. Essentially, we would do data engineering, provide data to people, do a couple of data analysis, that kind of thing. If you wanted to bring in a new team and say, hey, I like this team, I think they should also do analytics. The problem was like, well, there's already a team that does this. Plus, everyone has to vote on that. And then maybe analytics is not that mission critical, but let's think about like a new risk advisor. So instead of having block analytics, we'll say, hey, let's have a block and let's have another one. Or let's have a new project engineering team actually building and maintaining smart contracts in the system. There were decisions that had an immense amount of impact into the system. So again, it carried a lot of risk. Now with the sub-DAO model, you limit that risk just to the sub-DAO. And actually, if it works great at a single sub-DAO, other sub-DAOs can copy that model or basically hire the same ecosystem actors to actually perform the same service to them. So it's a great way to first validate the current ecosystem actors that do provide value, real value. A problem that we had before is we had way too many teams that were onboarded at one point, and while maybe once when they were onboarded, they were actually providing value, maybe in the long run they stopped providing value, or they didn't provide as much value as what they cost to maintain, what the budget asked for. And it's very difficult to readjust that. But if you atomize that and you bring it to a sub-DAO level, it's like, hey, if the sub-DAO is needing this type of services and hires this actor, is actually a great actor to do X, Y, and Z, then the next sub-DAO can look at it, it's like, well, we have similar needs. Let's also hire this sub-actor to actually provide this service to us. It's kind of in the same topic of experimentation. It helps you make decisions, de-risk decision making, and kind of like scope down the impact of people and teams, progressively give them more scope if they actually show the value that they can provide to the system as a whole. Okay, Chris, if you can hear me, Jonathan Marian, he's writing, so he might have a follow-up. If not, we can continue with your questions.
Yes, there's always something happen with Discord and me, but can you hear me, everyone? If not, let me just. Yeah. Okay. Good. So yeah, the perfect that we had more questions in the chat because there is something else regarding. I think we're gonna pass a little bit for Spark. We do have also more questions, but I think that there is regarding the topic of Athena and Morpho that I wanted to focus on. So when it comes to the Oracle fixed pricing, there has been like a lot of discussion, right? So could you tell us the advantages for certain use cases and also like any drawbacks for cases where this um decision or this idea might be no the best one, the best ideal?
Yeah. So the um, to maker through Spark through Local, lending by accepting so obviously and XP, um, the system of value tokens is always important. We also know that stablecoins are also form. You can always even worse in the worst case, they depict downwards. So why do a fixed oracle? Essentially, just assume the price is one instead of reading from the markets what the actual price, what people are trading it for is. First point is a caveat that this is not new to Maker. Currently, Sparkland, and actually AVC3 also has this. When it comes to Lido stake ETH, we also use that. We assume that one wrapped stake ETH is always worth one ETH, no matter what it's trading outside. And the main point is that these tokens have their value is not the main source of the value. It doesn't come directly from what it's trading in the AMMs in Uniswap or CowSwap, for example, but it's really what their backing is. And the case of Lido, I think it's a better example. It's a cleaner example, let's say, because essentially is Lido takes in your ETH, they deposit it into, so they have operators that basically run nodes on the network. They themselves, they basically just create a IOU token, which is the Lido stake ETH, saying, hey, you have an ETH token that we are using to validate transactions, and we give you a yield to that. Now, what happens if, let's say it's stake ETH, like no one, for some reason, people just, I don't know, I'm very influential, I write a tweet saying Lido is bad, I don't like stake ETH, and everyone just sells stake ETH and just plummets down to zero. The Lido system is still working. Lido still has your ETH there. They're still used to collateralize their operations. And then if you actually grab your stake ETH, you go into the system, you say, hey, I would like my ETH back. They are able to keep it back. So in that case, maybe listening to what the market is pricing this token at every single point doesn't make that much sense. Because if there's a massive panic with no real reason, you could essentially be taking the price, saying, okay, so the Lido stake ETH is worth zero, nothing. I'm going to liquidate all my users, and then in an hour, it's all back again because just people panicked. Now, to Paper's point, this is true. Lido is a much more transparent system. It's very easy to see because everything's fairly much on chain, and it's way more liquid than that. Now, for the case of Athena, and this kind of brings a little bit back, Athena is a little bit more complex because Athena has an off-chain component. at a very high level, and I'm going to basically minimize a lot the complexity of the Athena system. What Athena does is you give them your ETH, and they basically go and lend it out into Binance, another centralized exchanges. They do this because there's an instrument called perpetual future that traders are particularly happy to use that to leverage their positions. So if I'm a trader and I'm on Binance and I have one ETH, but I want to leverage up on, I'm going to buy more perpetual futures, go long, and then all of a sudden I'm exposed to, I technically have 10 ETH, but really I just asked 9 ETH as a loan. And then I either make a lot of money or lose a lot of money, right? What Athena does is, because there's so many traders doing this, the interest rate that they're willing to pay is quite high. It used to be when they announced, it was like, I think it's 60 or something ridiculous. So it's very profitable to be on the other side of this trade, to say, hey, I'm going to lend you my ETH to you. You're going to pay me the 70%. I'm going to be happy at the end of the term. You give me back my ETH plus 70% in fees. So this whole system is happening on Binance itself. It's a centralized exchange. It's not on chain at all. There's a couple more exchanges, and there's custodials in between. I don't think we need to get into that right now. But essentially, there's basically you take out the ETH from the system itself and you bring it off chain. So if for whatever reason there's a panic in the market with Athena and the price drops extremely fast, because also there's not that much trading of SUSD or liquidity for it itself there. Again, similar to Lido, not the same, but similar. The value is really just locked up in Binance. So as long as Binance still works and all the other exchanges work, the custodials work, this like sudden panic that would usually make or spark more for liquidate users instantly would be incorrect. You were just reading. You basically have you have incorrect or you have limited information. Now, it's great for this. It solves for this like flash crashes that have no fundamental value. No, they don't make real much sense. It's just people speculating. Now, what the problem is? The problem is that you are basically underwriting of you say, I validate that USD and SUSD will always be worth $1, which again, not just like a sudden craze, it's just really just not worth that. Let's say there's something happens with Binance. I think as an industry, we've seen a lot of entities that we assumed were incredibly secure and correct, and all of a sudden they were in shambles. So that actually happens. You're exposing yourself to this because if everyone else in the market is reading the market price and they say, hey, SUSD is not worth $1, it's worth 90 cents, and you keep claiming it's worth $1, people are going to be like, cool, I'm just going to give you my SUSD. You assume it's $1. I'm going to take the loan from you, and then it's just going to disappear because you're basically giving me free money. So you have both sides. And it's really just a balance of what risk you think is more likely to happen compared to the other one. So in the case of Athena, the idea is there's an assumption or there's a trust in that same case that the Athena system works correctly, will work correctly, and in a worst case scenario where the market price just dumb, so the system fails for whatever reason, depositors, which entail would then pay back Maker, but essentially we can simplify this and being like, Maker will be able to get their money back. They'll just have to wait till Athena liquidates and Binance sends some money back and so on. Again, it's a very big assumption. It's a trust assumption. It's in traditional finance, we call this counterparty risk. You're exposed to Athena, which in themselves are exposed to Binance, to Copper, Cebus, and the other custodials, and so on. And again, there's actually I'm going to link up here. This is very interesting. Athena is very keenly aware of this. They try to show as transparent as possible how diversified they are. But in certain cases, like today, for example, they're not that well diversified when it comes to exchanges, for example. If you look up here, 62% of all the positions are in Binance. Although they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 6 other exchanges, they basically any dent compared to the total amount that Binance is. So in the same way that we talked about this inheritance of risk from one entity to the other, Carre is still exposed to this. And tomorrow, Athena decides to scrap all the exchanges, scrap all the exchanges, and just put money into one bank account. That is the decision that impacts negatively Maker. So it's essentially, you look at risk, you look at how to mitigate them, and then you make a risk-adjusted decision whether this makes sense or not. And then on the other side, Maker has certain basically controls to actually be able to mitigate this. So as you might know, rather than doing basically adjusting the parameters of this DDM through governance, which we currently have, I think we still have 2 weeks from proposal to executive vote, plus it used to be 48 hours delay between voting confirmation and execution, but I think now it went down to 16 hours. For the Athena vote, particularly, this is coming down to a multisig or even a EOA signed by one of the governance facilitators. So again, it allows for more rapid response, but also incurs some more risks. The nice thing about anything that most things that go through Maker governance is they should be highly vetted, and there's a lot of time to actually wait. You can see that decision happening. The same way that SDAI rate changes, and any user that is an SDAI knows basically with 2 weeks in advance, usually, that their rate is going to change. Again, we're talking about always predictability. It's a very good user experience to actually know what's going to happen. Ideally, Maker is the most predictable system in the world, because with predictability comes peace of mind, essentially. Now, Maker is going through some changes, so this is clearly not the case nowadays. We've seen it when there was the emergency executive that changed interest rates from 6% all the way up to 16% in pretty much basically over a weekend. Hopefully, that basically is a tumultuous time that we figure our things out and don't need to make such drastic decisions, essentially.
There are two questions related to these, but first I would like to ask you today if it's okay with you if we can go on, since we already have an hour in this. Yeah, perfect. So we're talking about this. Great. Athena and Morphle. So focusing on this, if the TVL continues to grow as its current rate, so reaching 600 million or even 1K, do you believe that the parameters set for the vault are enough to ensure on-chain liquidity? Do you think that this is something that it's beneficial or not really? How do you see this part?
Good point. Let me check actually, because I saw this morning that the Athena rate it just plummeted. It's not even that interesting anymore. It's not even 50%. It's 17%. So in that case, yeah. Okay, so SUSD APY is currently 17%. And if I go to Block Analytica's Morpho market page, SUSD is charging 21% to borrowers. So currently, if you're someone that basically has leveraged up on SUSD using Athena and SDAI, you're basically losing money. Maybe on a daily basis, not that much, but you're basically losing money. What's bound to happen is that users are going to start deleveraging themselves, meaning they're going to basically give back their debt and they're going to close the positions. So that means that the credit line is going to go low, going to go way lower. Because we currently have, it's tapered down quite significantly. So I think this is a normal response to the market. You essentially have people willing to pay 70% to basically borrow your ETH to be able to leverage up. The more people that are willing to lend to them, the more competition there is on the supply side, the lower the rate will be. And at some point, there's a position where it's like you as a liquidity provider, do you actually are that incentivized to give money to this type of traders? Currently, for 70% annualized, I don't think it's worth it. So this credit line is surely going to lower down and taper down with that in mind. Now, to your specific question of are the parameters set up correctly currently, I don't know that much to give you a proper opinion on this. The nice thing, and here's maybe ungoverned protocols are really cool. This is the nice thing of having a very active governance, or like basically active teams like Block Analytica working on this. That the more the credit line increases, the more the parameters will actually be trimming and focusing on actually ensuring that nothing disastrous can happen.
Going back to that topic, do you have anyone in mind besides Block Analytica who could kind of like take the role? I don't know if it's as a scope advisor for risk, but just someone that knows or is an expert in when it comes to risk parameter that can also be in the end game.
Very good question. I've been thinking about this idea of the the advisory roles, I think they're called. I have a personal pet peeve with the wording of the atlas on this, because it asks that the advisor has no conflicts of interest. And I think the problem that we have in not even crypto DeFi particularly, we're a niche. There's very few people that are actually working on this at the scale that we're working at. So if you truly find someone that has no conflict of interest whatsoever, I'm comfortably able to tell you that they have no experience whatsoever in this. The people that have the experience and are able to do and give you proper good advice on what the rate should be and what the parameters should be, have conflict of interest. They're working in industry. They've been working in industry before. So I don't have a specific name in mind or a team in mind that would tackle this. I would say that I think then it would be great to see a revisit of this role in a way that takes into account that there will be conflicts of interest. I don't know. If you look at risk providers, I only know two others, and none of them have the same, let's say, methodology as Block Analytica. These are Gauntlet and Chaos Labs. They focus more on and I could be wrong here, but I'm pretty sure they focus more on modeling, of risks. Chaos Labs currently works for Aave. Gauntlet just stopped working with Aave and now is working. I think they're only doing stuff for Morpho for their own vaults. I think. Technically, they have conflict of interest with Maker. There you go. Thanks, Paper. Yeah, exactly. Agent-based analysis. Essentially, they're running simulations, and they kind of simulate not only it's like if the number goes up, this thing happens, but also I have an agent, I have a user that if rate goes up, they do this. I have another agent that if rate goes up, I do this other thing, and they kind of just try to mimic reality as much as possible. I think there needs to be a framework where you can have these other teams, or you have these experts. Again, I don't think unfortunately this can be outsourced masses. I think you need to have experts on this. And if they're an expert, they're working on something else that technically you could consider that a competition to Maker. I think what you want to have is you want to have more the most transparent possible opinion. The concepts that are just not graspable for everyday people. So you need to find a way to have this kind of validation of experts. How you achieve that, I have no idea.
Yeah, that was something that I was coming up with since in the last Twitter space or X space where Arun mentioned that they are looking for risk parameter experts. So I wanted to kind of like, okay, is there someone that you have in your mind? So you mentioned actually to Chaos Labs and uh, some others apart from Block Analytica, and I think that it's I mean that if they are looking for, let's start also kind of like have in mind who could take that role, not necessarily as a scope advisor, since there's nothing that we know about it, there's no like updates on that. So but it's a good insight that you're giving to that role. Now this is the last question, I promise. So a few days ago, I think it's here, it's not, but Jadma from the team as well, he posted in the forum about an idea, an initiative about that it's kind of like similar to, or well, it's like a comparison between USDE, and this is called ES Die, so it's enhanced saving die. And this product idea was specifically designed to work with Maker. So here in the
Yeah.
post, it raises. You read it, perfect. Because I was trying to give like a summary.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
but what do you think
I
that
actually,
this?
so actually, this idea has been talked in Maker. I think it was like 2 years ago that this idea was discussed. At that point, it was called EtherDie. And actually, when we presented Phoenix Labs and the idea of Spark to the community, we had EtherDie actually in the initial post, thinking like this might actually happen like anytime soon. It didn't end up happening. So the idea, as far as I understand, is basically just creating our own liquid staking ETH derivative product. I think it's a good idea. I think we should, like, Maggie should be doing it. The problem there is like you need to have experts running this, and it's like, what's the incentive for an expert to actually be running this? Plus, also that we see it currently with Lido stake ETH against the other LSTs, which is, it's incredibly, like, network effects are incredibly strong. Maker onboarded Rocket ETH a long time ago, and it barely paid the Oracle fees that it incurred. And it's a sad thing. It's a sad thing that people don't, users in general are not looking for as much diversity as possible. But it also presents a problem. Is like, from a user experience point perspective, is like, I don't want to choose a worth of product just for the sake of the entire network, while I get less value, less worth user experience on an individual basis. Actually, Paper mentioned this a bit ago when we were talking about Tina, that not only is Athena exposed to lighter stake ETH, but they're also exposed to more exotic LSTs such as METH and BETH. The diversity asks me to basically, instead of buying lighter ETH, to go buy BETH. BETH is smaller. I'm not sure exactly how it works. It has less of a Lindy effect. Essentially, it has been less proven, has less time in the market than lighter ETH. So unfortunately, it is a lesser product. So you also have to consider this idea of, like, if Maker enters this, what is the demand for this? What is the demand, and also the business model that you can have behind this at a Maker perspective, at a market perspective, not just at Maker. I think there's Maker has had a culture of building things in-house, because when Maker first got created, there was basically no DeFi. There was no environment at which they can pull from other experts to actually use their thing. Big reason why Chronicle Labs, or basically the Chronicle Oracles, exist, is because at that point there weren't some proper Oracle providers that can actually fulfill this. Now that we do have an ecosystem, it's a very good position to have, from a culture of building in a house, of like making this decision. Do we build this in house, or do we basically collaborate with an external party that might be experts on their own rights on this? So kind of bring this to a more concrete point, is like, should Maker create its own LSD, or should Maker basically provide a ETH vault for Lido or Rocket ETH, as it's already been doing? Again, I'm very much forward to experimentation. I think it should be experimented on, it should be tried on, but it's an incredibly difficult thing to achieve because you have a lower economies of scale benefits. They only achieve once you get to a stage, basically the size of Lido. And also on the other side is the opportunity cost. Instead of spending time, resources, money on this, what other type of experiments could you be doing that might actually reap more benefits to Maker? Ultimately, the whole, Maker it before subDAOs, but currently now with subDAOs, you want to diversify the collateral underpinning DAI as much as possible. So I think it's more looking into that, how much collateral diversity you can get to ensure the resiliency of DAI itself.
You brought up the subDAOs, so we are going to end with this part. You also discuss the kind of like the structure that you're thinking for the subDAOs, but there is this concept that anyone can build a subDAO. I think that was a beginning how it started. So this, how do you think this could be more practical or like achievable, so we can have in the future, as that is a purpose, to have many more subDAOs?
Yeah, I'm a very big fan of this. I really want to see external teams coming in and building their own subDAOs. The last few years, I contributed in Maker and just meeting people from other teams. I've seen amazing things, amazing teams that just simply lack I like to call it distribution channel. And I think Maker has that distribution channel already set up. I think the one important thing is that I think there's a lot of refinement to be done with what a subDAO is, what it can be, and how it should operate, how it should relate back to Maker. That I see this like basically beta launch as being quite a necessity before opening up. I think we'd be very unfortunate if we opened it up, had 10 new subDAOs, and one of them failed catastrophically, and the right guardrails weren't put in place, and that affects the entire system, and then basically that takes the confidence out of the system to actually have more subDAOs. I think we need to have them. I think it's a matter of time to have them. I think it'll just be a market pressure. Eventually, we need to have more subDAOs. We need to have more diversity. But how do you effectively vote in a subDAO that will actually provide value and benefit to the Maker ecosystem, as opposed to taking it away? We saw it with core units, that the first core units they're still around, so they definitely work. But we kept onboarding more and more core units in the name of experimentation. But the problem with that type of experimentation is that it had no goal. It had no point at which you had no way of measuring how successful an experiment or core unit was. You also had there was a problem with incentive as well. There was no upside, because all our teams would basically run on a budget. So you just get a monthly stipend, and you would have to produce value. So let's say I started a core unit a while back, and then I think it makes sense at the start, and then it stops making sense. My whole existence is for my core unit to actually make sense. If I don't adapt, I just try to pretend as much as possible so people don't basically fire me. That was the problem with it's very much like how Maker became quite bloated. And I see paper writing, and I think this is going to have a way more accurate description of what the state of it was before. So the point is, how do you make this not be a repeat of core units with subDAOs? How do you onboard a team that's actually going to produce value, that has skin in the game, that is not working, they're just going to be put out from the system almost immediately and not just carried on and getting the bills paid just because no one wants to be the bad guy that has to fire them.
Yeah, I also say nothing because they're typing, but uh,
Waiting for papers point on this. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So Papers Point says this will still be a problem. I think look at the two arrangers. This is mentioned Monetalis and Block Tower. They're doing the same thing, and there's a clear difference in quality and return. Core units didn't have counterfactuals, so those are supposed to, but no clear governance will act upon it. Correct. When core units came up, the idea was like, hey, anyone can create core units. If a core unit is doing a bad job, it's just simply a new team. The market essentially will basically dictate that a new team shows up. Let's say I, as a facilitator of the data instance coordinate, hopefully I hope I did a good job, but like, let's say I did a disastrous job. You would expect a new team of the analytics to come up and be like, hey, we want to do this job because we clearly think Tadeo is not doing a good job. On theory, that sounded great, right? They're going to be onboarded. You're going to have a time where you have two teams running and doing exactly the same thing. And basically imagine, let's say that we also get paid the same. Like we have the same budget, both teams. One team is producing way more value than the other one's very easy decisions like, hey, Tadeo, thanks for doing this, but you're clearly not, really good investment. We're going to kick you and your team out. In practice, this never happened. Because in practice, I have to be a proper insane, like catastrophic public disaster to actually warrant people's attention to actually go and fire me. Just because there's people like there was a way more things happening. So like, do you really want to figure out how bad a job is Tadeo doing? And on the other side is from the new team perspective. Even if there's a team hungry to do work and provide value on the analytics front, it's very difficult on a human level to look at an organization and say, hey, there's a team of analytics doing there. I'm just going to apply and try to do their job and get them out. Most people don't see themselves as a bad person or the bad guy, so they're basically there's no real incentive to do it. And on the other side, from a governance perspective, a new team coming up, it's a new analytics team saying, hey, one of the same job that they're doing. The theory dictated that we should have redundant teams. So we should have two teams doing the same thing. But in practice, it's a very big waste of money. There's also, unless you put very strong KPIs, you're still not going to be able to measure them, measure correctly who's doing a better job. Maybe the other team produces way more analysis and stuff than my team. But maybe most of the analyses are not that important. And like I produce maybe one analysis per month, and it's actually super on point and it's great, and everyone loves it. Maybe one team is better at selling themselves on Twitter than my team. Maybe I build a whole infrastructure backend that no one understands and no one sees, but that means that I can run a leaner team and only spend maybe $1,000 a month on infrastructure, while the other guys just like keep punching AWS and asking for more things and end up spending 10 times more. It's very difficult from a governance perspective to make this assessment essentially. So the hope is that if governance only has to validate a sub-DAO and they have their own bottom line, it means that a sub-DAO, if they hire me and I'm doing analytics and I'm doing a great job, they're like, cool, you can continue. If I'm doing a bad job, they're like, hey, we're going to look for someone else. Because we want more value from it, or because although you provide some value, you're too expensive. It's more of a team decision or a small committee decision. So that's the idea. That's what it's been tried to avoid. Basically, a repeat of core units. Hopefully happens. But again, back to your question. Yes, it will be the ideal. The end state is to have multiple sub-DAOs, but you can't go ahead and just like onboard 10 new ones because it's just going to be insane. Again, let's think. The most important thing for me, I think, is like we need to reduce the governance workload. Like it can't be that you need to have like I need to spend like all your weeks and your weekends reading it to stay up to date, to have an opinion on every single little fact, to actually be able to vote correctly. I think the introduction of delegation made a lot of sense back then because a normal user had no way of taking care of everything. But at the same time, we also overloaded delegates. Even a single delegate couldn't do everything. So again, on the governance side, I'm not as I don't have all the info, but what you guys are doing, this the idea of the concept of AVCs makes a lot of sense. It's like, hey, have people that kind of have the same idea, wander through these decisions, basically come up with a answer, basically an edit that they would like to have, get pushed down into the edits of the atlas, and then that brings back a separate entity that comes in and actually goes and executes that decision making. And yeah, and Paperwood says it's very hard to displace an incumbent, especially when there are high switching costs. I totally agree. So ideally, you maybe you can't avoid this high switching cost, but ideally you essentially have this like semi-independent entities that you're not covering the entire cost of them. Ideally, and again, this is not currently happening. All the teams are currently running on budgets directly paid by Maker. But in the future, every sub-DAO should be able to self-sustain themselves, even to the point of being having their own decision making, of like being able to run at a loss. If they have a treasury, they can pay for that. And then that kind of like the decision is no longer Maker. It's the sub-DAO's decision to how they want to operate and how they want to grow and what's valuable to them or not. But again, it's extremely hard.
Well, thank you so much, Tadeo, for more than an hour being with us and explaining us all these topics that are relevant for what is happening today in Maker in the end game. I'm gonna give you um, a minute for you to say goodbye or and to say something that you haven't mentioned before. Maybe what is going to happen with Tadeo now that it's no longer with Spark. Only if you want to share. But yeah, I'm going to give you time.
Great. Well, Chris, now first of all, thanks for having me. I love talking about this nerdy things. Super interesting. Also, I don't have all the answers, and I feel like in my opinion is just a distillation of a lot of others' opinions and writings that I get. So, for example, particularly on the FINA topics, you share with me Mona Supply's post, but I also highly recommend people to read Sam McPherson, so like Hexonauts, stuff that he publishes, and also One True Kirk. Kirk used to be part of Vault's protocol, now is building a new protocol called Credit Guild. And he also publishes super well detailed, and I read them, and basically I end up figuring out what the hell is going on. So I encourage you to read them. On my own self, I'm just taking some time off. It's been 3 years of just non-stop work, so I'm going to enjoy it a bit. And in the meantime, I'm here in Buenos Aires. I'm being part of Mu, which is kind of like a kind of Zuzalu type event. Essentially, it's a co-work where crypto-friendly people come and for like a month and a half. Now we still have a whole month ahead of us. Doing workshops, chatting with each other. I've done already a stablecoin workshop there. I think I want to do another one there. Next week, I think we have Protocol Labs coming in as well and chatting with us. So yeah, if everyone's around, you're more than happy to come. It's great fun. And yeah, that's about it.
Thank you, everyone. By the way, great jacket, cool jacket. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.